This is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. All right, welcome everyone to this episode of the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I'm here with Allie Stone. I met Allie at a workshop in the city a few weeks ago. Maybe it was a month ago now, I'm not even sure. She was on a panel discussing marketing for businesses and entrepreneurs. And Allie, I loved your energy and I wanted to know more about your story. And you seemed, my impression was that you were really happy doing what you're doing, but thoughtful about what you're doing and strategic in your business. And that's all I really know about you, was my impression. And so I thought, she'd be someone really cool to talk about how she got to where she is and share her story and kind of some lessons for our audience. So that's why you're here today. So thanks for joining. Allie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Julie. I'm excited to chat with everybody today. So I'll introduce myself again. Like Julie mentioned, my name is Allie Stone. I am a lifestyle blogger, content creator, and professional photographer based here in Chicago.
Awesome. Yes, I'm in Chicago too. I think you know that.
Yes.
So let's start with, first of all, did you set out to do this cool stuff you're doing with your blogging, your photography? Did you start off doing that? Did you go to school to be a professional photographer? How did it come about, your career as it is now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the blogging part was a total accident. The photographer part was on purpose. So I grew up in a very creative family and always loved my art classes, loved fashion. I grew up to a very fashionable mother and Bubby, my mom's mom. And from a young age, I loved putting together outfits and getting dressed and watching my Bubby get dressed. And it just was ingrained in me from a young age. And when I was about 13 years old, I found an old film camera of my mom's in a cabinet and taught myself how to use it and started creating sets, making my friends model for me, setting up photo shoots, and just loved it from day one. And so fast forward a little bit, I was the TA in photography classes in high school. After I finished taking all the classes, I started shooting senior pictures for friends and for different people in my high school. And then I shot my first paid job at age 15. So the photography started really early for me. And then I did end up going to school to major in photography at Columbia College here in Chicago.
Oh my gosh, Allie!
Yeah.
I went to Columbia for a year. I went to Columbia I was 17 when I started. I was studying advertising art.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was
amazing.
Such a cool school. Yeah, I ended up switching up what I was doing, but yeah, it's a very cool school. All right, awesome.
It is. It's an interesting place. Yeah. So my goal was always to find a way to marry my two passions of fashion and photography. And I didn't exactly know what that looked like when I started school. I was thinking that I wanted to be an editorial fashion photographer. And that's kind of always where my head was at. So when I was 21, I landed an internship at Harper's Bazaar in New York. And at this time, I had been reading a bunch of different fashion blogs and loving them. And I just never really had an excuse to start one. And so when I got this internship, I decided, this could be a cool thing to write about. So Those White Walls started as a documentation of my journey moving to New York and working in the fashion industry. And it was kind of all over the place. Everything from what I was wearing to work to what I was eating and doing and seeing in New York City. And since then, it's evolved into what it is today, which is a fashion, travel, and lifestyle blog.
That is so cool. I love that you were just following your passions along the way and figuring out, even at a young age, just saying, I want to combine these two together. Did someone suggest that to you? Or was it like just in your brain, you were like, I could put these two things together and make something out of it? Just curious.
Yeah, it was totally in my brain. They were my two biggest passions, and I loved both so much. So I was like, how can I figure out how to integrate these things into my life forever? And the blog was totally an accident. When I started it, it was just a side thing for fun. Like, it wasn't at all meant to turn into a job. It just so happened that it worked out that way.
Wow, that's so cool. All right, so you went to Columbia, you went to New York, and you were working there at Harper's Bazaar, and then you started to do the fashion, the photography, and the blog. When did you finally say, hey, I can do this? Along the way, were you just loving what you're doing, and then you decided to go out on your own, or was that little by little as you were, were you happy doing what you're doing, but you just did this on the side, or was it like, you know what, I need to stop doing that and just do, the combo lifestyle thing you have now?
Yeah, absolutely. So since I graduated college, actually, I have worked for myself and run my own businesses. So out of college, I was working full-time as a freelance photographer. And then the blog, I called my second full-time job. I was a photographer during the daylight hours and a blogger during the dark hours of the day. And I was working for different people in Madison. I actually moved back to my hometown after I graduated college because I had a freelance gig for shopbop.com as a photographer there. So I was working part-time as a freelancer for shopbop.com, shooting senior portraits, shooting family pictures, doing all that good stuff, and then writing the blog on the side. And I also, my mom and I co-own a jewelry business, and she's in Madison. So I also was working on that pretty heavily when I moved back there.
Oh, and then finally, how did you make the move to Chicago and where you are now?
Yeah, so I decided to come back to Chicago about a year and a half after I graduated college. I just decided and thought that for what I wanted to do, I felt like I needed a little bit of a bigger city, more accessibility, a little more, a place that's more ingrained into the fashion world. So I moved back to Chicago with no work. It was an interesting decision looking back at it, but I just kind of went all in and started networking like crazy, going to every event I could get my hands on, introducing myself to anyone and everyone that I could meet, asking for coffee meetings, etc. And I also reached out to one of the women that I interned for in college, whose name is Helen Birkin, and asked if she had any connections or any advice. And she had told me that one of her good friends, who was a fashion blogger, had actually just fired her photographer and was looking for a new one. So I ended up meeting her and shooting for her full time, and she was really well known in the city. And so when people started finding out that I was shooting for her, everyone wanted me to shoot for them. So it just kind of snowballed, and all of a sudden I had 50 plus photography clients, and I was shooting 15, 20 hours a week. It was pretty crazy and amazing. And so I was doing that for many, many years, I think 4 years, blogging on the side, until the blog gained enough traction and I had enough income coming from the blog that I could kind of start phasing out photography for other clients and solely focusing on my own content creation and blogging work. So now I've been blogging full-time for just over 2 years.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. What I love about that story, I was going to ask you, one of my questions was going to be about, what do you think made you successful early on? But I already know from that little blurb right there, which is you threw yourself into it and you were networking, you were taking risks, you were making introductions everywhere you could and asking for meetings. But that one little, I'm going to reach out to Helen Birkin and see what advice she has for me. And then she just happened to know someone who needed a blogger, a fashion blogger, which is exactly what you were wanting to do at the time. That's crazy. And if you'd never asked for that question or reached out to her, who knows, your career trajectory obviously would have taken a different turn. You probably still would have ended up where you are, but who knows? You just never know until you ask a question, right? I just want to get that across to people. So it's so awesome that you did this early. You knew about how to do this early on in your career so that you can have this success and be loving what you're doing now in your 20s and 30s instead of waiting till you're 50 or 60 years old. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I told myself, I was like, failure isn't an option here because I know what I want to do. So I just have to figure out a way to make it work. And it's definitely not comfortable and it's not easy. But hard work, always pays off, and stepping outside of your comfort zone and pushing yourself to do what needs to be done to reach your goals always proves to pay off in the end.
Oh, I love that. I tell my kids that all the time. You will never regret hard work. It will always pay off in one way
Totally.
or another. It might not be the way you think it's going to, but it will never not pay off. Oh, I love that. That's awesome,
Totally.
Allie. So along the way, when you were taking those risks and you were, obviously working hard and probably worrying about how things were going to turn out, what did you do to stay happy and peaceful along the way? Like, what did you tell yourself, or did you have practices in place, or do you have people to go to?
I've always been really close with my family. I have one younger brother, and then I'm very close with both my parents and specifically my mom. So they've always been really supportive and been like a constant source of happiness and support. So I talk to my family a lot. Honestly, I worked all the time. There wasn't that much else I did besides work, but one thing that's been really important for me along the way is being active. It's definitely my therapy. So I was doing a lot of yoga and just trying to keep calm and keep that peace of mind while I was just working my butt off and crossing my fingers that things would work.
Oh, that's awesome. And you can do that anywhere, no matter how old you are, or what job you're in. Doing
Or
those small, they seem like small things, but they have such a big impact because they allow you keeping calm and yoga practice, for example, and having that peaceful kind of centeredness helps you to do all
Mhm.
those other things that you're doing, working all those hours and taking all those risks. It propels you in those other areas. I don't think everyone always realizes. They think they don't have time for those things, but those things help you perform better in so many other ways.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's
Totally agree.
cool. Okay, so tell me what advice you would have for someone. So whether they're in their 20s or 30s, they're still in college, they're just got out of college, or maybe they're in their 30s or 40s figuring out how they want to use their strengths and their passions to be successful, even if it's not as an entrepreneur, but working for a company that's, and they're using their strengths every day and they're happy. What would you say to someone searching for those kinds of things?
Oh, there's so many things I would say, but I think first of all, I would say set your goals high. Um, be resourceful. Use all the connections that you have. Don't be afraid of the word no because you will hear it over and over again, but all you need is that one right yes. And that will come your way too. And just work hard and do your best to be your best self and find what truly makes you happy, and don't stray from that.
Yeah, I like that. Don't stray from it, because when you start to stray is when you pick up on other things, or you're performing at other tasks or whatever, and then you feel that you're not lit up, you're not feeling that peacefulness, you might be working hard, but you're still feeling like that there's something missing or a void. And if you
Totally.
usually ask yourself the question about like what's making me happy and what's that thing I want to go for that I'm fearing or whatever, it's usually because you strayed away from that. Come back and ask yourself that question. You're like, okay, so I can be scared and still do it. I can be scared and still be successful. I think people sometimes just say, oh, God, I'm afraid of it. This over here is secure. And so I'm just going to focus on that. But if that's not making you happy and that's not something that you're waking up excited about every day, you're not going to be as successful at that. And you're definitely not going to be as happy and peaceful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes is that something like, every good thing is on the other side of fear. And I think it's just a good reminder that big steps and changes are scary, but that you're not alone. Like everybody's scared and throughout their life and making changes and whatever it might be. If you're applying for jobs, if you're changing jobs, if you're going off on your own, nothing is going to be easy. It's all going to be scary, but it's going to be worth it. Usually when there's fear in something, that means like surpassing that fear is going to be worth it.
Yeah, and I was reading something recently about fear and how it's your indicator that you're on the right path. So you might think, I'm afraid of that. Maybe that's not the right thing for me. It usually means if it's a good amount of fear, not too much. It means you're on the right track. It's going to be a little hard to go over there. You're taking a risk, but that's the thing that you should go for, especially if you get excited talking about it and thinking about it and reading about it. Going for it is going to reap lots of rewards. But so many people look at that and say, oh, I'm kind of scared about it if it doesn't work out, so I'm not going to try it. Well, then guess what? You're never going to have it, right? Because you didn't even make an effort.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love what you're saying. Everything, I'm writing down what you're saying because you have a lot of good little snippets in there. Being resourceful too. I love that because you're setting your goals high. So a lot of people will say, well, I put down the goals and I'm not reaching them, so I'm just going to kind of stop because it's not working for me. But you can set your goals high, and you have to turn around and look at the other side and say, okay, I have these goals over here on the left. On the right hand side, how can I break these down a little bit and say, what can get me here? Who can I talk to about this? Who can I ask the question to, or send an email to, or pick up a phone? I'm doing this all the time too in my business, asking complete strangers about what they do and they want to be in my podcast just because it sounds cool. And how do you know whether they say no or not? Like you said, also, a no just means keep trying. You're going to get the no's, but all you need is one yes. So if they say no to you, in my theory now, I'm a little bit older than you. Looking around, getting that no used to be so scary. And I love that you were still young enough to know that no was a necessity, basically. But hearing that no is always like, oh, then maybe that means I'm not on the right path. It's like, no, just not a right fit for that person. And instead of thinking it as they're saying no to you, this isn't right timing for them, but there's someone else that it is right for. If you keep asking the question, you'll find that person. I just read this, I was listening to a radio show last week and someone was quoting all the most successful people, famous people that we all know, and how many times they were told no. And if they had stopped along the way, we wouldn't have things like J.K. Rowling is a big example. I'm sure everyone's heard of. She wrote, I think she got, her book proposals were turned down maybe 100 times. It was a big number. And people just kept telling her no. And then finally one person said yes. And then look what happened to her life. And everything that came after, all that creativity. And if she had ever stopped, no one would have any of that to see all that, her creative outlet, those movies, those books, bringing millions of people happiness, And then the other one that stuck out to me was Sylvester Stallone in the Rocky movie. He was actually homeless for a month in New Jersey, living in the Port Authority building before he wrote that Rocky script. And he was sitting in his apartment writing it. Finally, when he got it, I guess he had an apartment at the time, his electricity went out. And he sold his dog for $25 to turn his electricity back on while he's writing the script for this movie.
Wow, that's wild.
Right? It's so crazy. I was telling my sons the other day, and I said, if he had stopped, and then it was Rocky, and then all those other movies after that, and he was I don't think he was super young when he wrote that movie. He also said that he had 1,500 different agencies or talent agencies or people say no to him. You're not going to be successful, and no, we don't want you. And if he had stopped and never written that script, people wouldn't be quoting, we quote Rocky in our house. I know it's an old movie, but it's famous because he didn't stop. Yeah, it's still famous, all because he didn't stop and listen to the no's. It's so, so important. It's so easy to turn away and say, okay, I got to know I'm done. But no, you can't stop, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I'm so glad. So I'm so glad you learned the lesson early. Were your parents, you said they were a constant source of support. Did they teach that to you, or did you just kind of know, this is what I'm going to do? Like it was just in your head already about the no's?
Well, my parents, I think, taught me from a young age. First of all, they were always so supportive of whatever ideas I had. And from a young age, they were pushing me to be creative and to follow through on whatever ideas that I had in my head. And I think that helped a lot in like teaching me not to be scared and finding that, whatever was in my head, they told, growing up, they were like, that is a good idea. Let's see it. Like, we want to see you carry that out. So I think just having that support from day one and saying like, your ideas are good. Let's see these finished products, and always having that encouragement and that push to finish things and to try new things, made it more okay when I heard no's, because I knew that it was a good idea, and I was confident in my ideas, and I think my parents instilled that in me. So I didn't feel like I was being knocked off my horse. Also in college, I think I grew a really thick skin going to art school. You go through really intense critiquing throughout your years, and I had some really intense, really harsh professors, and you'd work so hard on projects for months, and sometimes they'd just get torn apart, but they'd say, well, let's see, the next one's going to be better, like outdo yourself, do better. And it was never a no. It was just like, let's try again, try harder, you can do better. And so I think through college, I also grew a really thick skin because I'd worked so hard on these things that would just be shot down. And then I'd tell myself, well, it's not over. I just need to do better. And so I think that really helped me also.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So it's funny because I went to Columbia College, and for a year, I was going to study advertising art. And I too loved drawing growing up. I was really creative. And my dad was like a lot like your parents. And he would always say, like, that's a good idea. Let's go research it. We'd get out our encyclopedias. This is, we didn't have the internet when I was growing up. So we'd get on our encyclopedias and research topics that I was curious about. But I went to Columbia. I said, I love to draw. I'm good at it. I've been told I'm good at it. I know I am. And then I'd sit in these classes. I was 17 years old when I started college because my birthday was in September. And these people in my classes were coming. So they'd say, like, draw a boat, for example. And I'd draw a boat. And it was a good boat. It was really good, I thought. And I would be comparing myself to the other people in the class. And there were people that were 10 years old, 12 years older in class with me, 25-year-old people, 27-year-old people. And their artwork was unbelievable. And I remember saying to my dad, I don't think I'm in the right place. And he said, well, that's why you're there, so you can learn. And I said, Dad, I can't learn what's in their brain, and what they put on paper is so far and above me. And it's not just because they were older. It's like in their imagination, they saw that. I said, I can't get to that level. So I actually stopped, and I said, I'm going to go back. I actually went to community college for a year, and then I ended up graduating with a marketing and economics degree, and then I became a teacher, et cetera. But in that moment, I just at 17 said, I don't have the talent. Like, this is not something I can compete against. And he tried to steer me the other way and say, no, stay there. And didn't think of it as quitting. I said, this is not the path for me. Like, and I was the opposite of you. I wasn't like, I didn't feel critiqued. I just thought I could do better. But I said, in 4 years, I'm going to be competing for jobs with people that can do this. And I don't know that I could ever get there. And so my art was more literal, like draw a picture of a boat out perfectly. But I didn't have that super creative from a blank space imagination like these people had. So I just innately knew that. And it wasn't the right path for me. I ended up getting to teaching and training and learning and development, which I did for 20 years and I still love. So it's just kind of funny how, how you see yourself, and then how those lessons come back to what you hear your parents saying to you. So, interesting. For sure. Yeah. It was definitely a tough school. I remember great teachers, and but you're there to be better, and they'll help you do it for sure. So totally. Tell me about, so I have a final question for you. Tell me about, what do you wish you had learned a little bit earlier along the way? So you have so many cool traits and strengths, even at such a young age, even in high school, like knowing what you wanted to do and going for it. Is there anything you wish you had learned a little bit earlier now that you're kind of looking back? Do you wish you would have done something different in college, or do you love the path you took?
Well, there is one thing I think I really wish, there's something I would have done differently. I wish that I would have seen the potential and the future that the digital world had coming. And I think I would have thought more in advance about how I could scale my blog to be a business, because again, that was totally an accident. But I think if I would have known sooner and like been more like adapted to what was coming in the future in the digital world, that I could have started earlier and gotten ahead in a time where it was much easier to grow than it is now.
Yeah.
So I think just like paying attention to trends and doing your research and knowing what's coming in your space in the following months or years, I think and paying attention to your competition and knowing how you can stay with them and get ahead of them. I wish I would have paid a little more attention when I was starting my blog.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lots of great stuff. I can't wait for people to hear your lessons and your insight, because I think it's going to be so helpful. I don't care how old you are. Some things you just know, I'm at 15, I'm at 35, I'm at 50. And when you know it, you just say, I'm going for it or whatever. I love that you had a supportive family that guided you and said, great, because some people would have the opposite. You could never do that. And sometimes that's the fire that one person needs. Maybe it would have been the opposite for you. If they told you can't ever do that, maybe you wouldn't have been as encouraged to go do these other things. I think it works both ways, but either way, I'm so glad you kept going for it so that you can share your gifts and your strengths with the world and be doing what you love, and then sharing all of that happiness with other people, because that ends up being what your business is for, right? Like traveling and seeing beautiful things and enjoying your life and feeling good doing it, right?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's really wonderful to know that I have, this audience through this piece of technology in my hand. And if I can just make somebody smile or make somebody feel good every day, then it's a job well done in my book.
Oh, totally true. Totally agree. So where can people find your blog, your business? How can they connect with you and see all the good, cool stuff you're doing?
Yeah, of course. You can connect with me daily on Instagram. My handle is Allie Stone, and on the blog at thosewhitewalls.com.
Those White Walls. So tell me about that name. I was curious about that when I saw something a couple weeks ago. How did that name come about?
It's actually a very silly story. The name was actually born when I was 18 years old. I knew I wanted to do something creative and maybe eventually to write a blog. And I was trying to brainstorm a name for about a week and just could not think of anything. So I went into my suite mate's dorm room and I told them I needed help. And I said, just start naming things in the room. And, they were like microwave, TV, bed, like window. And then one of them said, white walls. And I was like, okay, that's intriguing. Let's just pause there. And I thought about it and I ended up loving it because everything in life is a white wall or a blank slate, and you have the ability to create whatever you choose. So I love the name Those White Walls because this is my blank slate and here's what I'm choosing to do with it.
Oh, I love that. I don't think that's a silly story at all. It's awesome. It's
Thank you.
I love it because it's so true. Just because people will say, oh, you can't do that. My husband and I will joke about this all the time. Say, you can't just do that. I'm like, why can't I? Well, you don't just paint. Like, I like to paint things and redo things and make them look fresh again. Well, you can't just paint anything, he'll say, just kind of his funny joke. I'm like, well, almost, yes, you can paint almost anything on the planet. You could probably paint. And it's a joke in our house because it's like, if you can dream it up and figure out a way to do it, of course you can do it. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it's a no. And
totally, I totally agree with you.
Right? And everything you're looking at was created by someone. Every color on your couch, on your rug, and the decorations you have in your house, your dishes, everything was created by someone who said, like, there used to just only be one color paint. It was, there wasn't even paint. And so it's like, when you think about that, people have just stopped and said, okay, it can't be done. We wouldn't have anything we have to enjoy. Right?
Exactly. I'm always the one saying to friends or people around me, if they say, oh, I don't know, I can't do that. I can't do that right now. And I'll say, why can't you? Well, yes. I don't know how. Well, figure it out. If you want to do it, you should do it. And like, oh, no, I can't. I'm like, yes, you can. Like, you're the only one standing in your way. You got this. Let's figure out how to do it.
You are the only one standing in your way. There's a great book I read recently, Marie Forleo's book, Everything is Figureoutable. She goes through that and just basically breaking down. At the end of the day, you can have, if you can dream it up, you can have it. Everything is figureoutable. You just have to be resourceful and go for it and ask questions. You can't just sit back and have it. It's not just going to land in your lap. You have to go for it. You have to go figure it out. But you can't have it. Awesome. Thanks, Allie. I really appreciated talking to you. It's fun hearing your stories. I love hearing how people came to be where they are in their careers and their lives. It's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can